Have you ever walked into a quiet room in your home and felt like something was missing, but couldn't quite put your finger on it? Maybe you glanced over at an old photo, saw your grandchild's handwriting on a birthday card, or just remembered a time when your phone rang more often than it does now. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? That sense that time has moved on, and somehow the connections you once had feel a little thinner, a little quieter. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered what your kids are feeling during the times when you're not around? Not just the big absences, like when you've moved to a different city or stopped visiting as often, but even the small ones. The weeks without a call, the birthdays you skip, the little silences that build up over time. You see, growing older changes a lot of things. It shifts our pace, our priorities, and sometimes even the roles we've always held in the family. Where you were once the anchor, the daily voice, the dependable presence, now there might be more space between visits, fewer dinners together, maybe less urgency to check in. It's easy to think your children have moved on, that they're too busy with work, parenting, life. But the truth is, your absence carries more weight than you might realize. Today, I want to talk with you, not at you, about what's really going on in your children's hearts and minds when you're not there. Because even though they may not say it out loud, there are things they feel deeply. And I believe that understanding these unspoken feelings can help you feel more connected, more empowered, and more at peace with your place in their lives. Let's begin with something simple but powerful. When you're not around, your children often feel a quiet sense of guilt. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that comes with tears or apologies. It's the kind that sneaks in late at night when they realize it's been too long since they last called. They remember your voice, your laugh, your advice, and they wish they had picked up the phone yesterday, or last week, or last month, but they didn't. Not because they didn't care, but because life happened. Work was hectic. The kids were sick. They meant to call, but the day slipped away. And when they finally lie down at night, it hits them. I should have called Dad. I hope Mom's okay. That guilt, while quiet, builds up over time, and it creates a small ache in their hearts. They may not talk about it, but it's there. And when you're out of sight for too long, that guilt often turns into fear. They begin to wonder, what if something happened and I wasn't there? What if I don't have as much time with them as I thought? That's not something they'll bring up in casual conversation. Most adult children try to stay strong in front of their parents. They don't want you to worry. But deep down, your absence reminds them of how fragile time really is. You might think they're too busy to notice, that they've got their own lives now, and maybe they don't even think about you as often. But they do. Sometimes your absence doesn't show up in a phone call or a text. It shows up in the way they linger on an old voicemail, or how they smile a little when they hear a song that reminds them of you. It's in the small ways, the quiet ways. Another feeling that often comes up for your children, whether they admit it or not, is regret. Not just regret over missed time, but regret over words they never said. Many adult children carry memories that feel unresolved. Maybe it was an argument years ago. Maybe it was a phase of life where they pushed you away without even knowing they were doing it. Now that they're older, more mature, they sometimes wish they could go back and be more patient, more understanding, more present. But they can't. So when you're not around, those old regrets start whispering again. Sometimes they want to reach out, but they don't know how. They worry you might still be hurt, or that too much time has passed. So instead of calling, they stay silent. Not because they don't love you, but because they don't know where to begin. And every day that passes makes the silence feel heavier. And yet, here's the beautiful part. Your presence, even in small ways, has the power to lighten that weight. A simple message, a handwritten card, a warm smile on a video call. It doesn't take much. But those moments remind them that love still lives between you. That even if time has passed, the bond isn't broken. Just resting, waiting to be reawakened. Now, let's talk about something a little harder. Something a lot of seniors feel, but don't always admit. That sense of being forgotten. Maybe you've felt it. So, you see your kids doing well, raising their families, growing their careers, and part of you wonders if there's still space for you in their lives, if they still need you, if they even notice when you're gone. But here's what most parents don't realize. Your kids miss your guidance more than they let on. They might not ask for advice the way they used to. They might not need help with homework or rides to school anymore. But what they do need, more than ever, is your wisdom, your steadiness, your ability to see the big picture when they're drowning in the small stuff. They won't always say it. In fact, they might act like they've got it all figured out. But deep down, there are days when they wish you were there to sit with them, remind them that it's going to be okay, or just say, "I'm proud of you." Your absence can make those moments of uncertainty feel even more lonely for them, because you've always been the person they quietly leaned on, even when they didn't say so out loud. So don't ever think you've stopped being needed. You're not a chapter that's closed. You're a part of the foundation that still holds their lives together. And when you're not around, that part of the foundation feels a little less sturdy. I want to pause here for a second and say something from the heart. If you've ever felt like your role in your children's lives has faded, if you've ever wondered whether your presence still matters, I want you to know this: it absolutely does. Your kids might be grown, but the emotional roots you planted in them still run deep. They still draw strength from your presence, even in silence, even from afar. And maybe, just maybe, your absence reminds them of how much you shaped them. How much of who they are today started with the quiet lessons you taught by simply being there, day after day, year after year. Now let's take a moment to breathe. We've touched on guilt, fear, regret, and even the hidden need your children still have for your guidance. These emotions aren't always obvious, but they are very real. They live beneath the surface. And sometimes, the only thing it takes to bring them back into the light is you. So if it's been a while since you've called, if you've been holding back, thinking they're too busy or too distant, reach out, because chances are they're feeling more than they're showing. And your voice, your presence, still has the power to heal old wounds, strengthen the bond, and remind them that love, especially between parent and child, doesn't fade. It simply waits. You know, one of the most surprising things I've heard from adult children over the years is this: "I miss just knowing Mom was around." Not necessarily talking every day, not needing anything, just knowing you were there, just a call away. Your presence, even when it's quiet, is like an emotional safety net. And when that net disappears, whether through time, distance, or silence, it can leave them feeling more vulnerable than they ever expected. We often assume that once our children are grown, they no longer need our emotional support. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, one of the most profound things your absence creates in their lives is a longing for emotional stability. Because no matter how old your kids get, they still have moments of self-doubt, heartbreak, and confusion. And in those moments, your steady voice, your way of saying, "You'll get through this," carries a power they can't find anywhere else. They may not say it out loud. In fact, they might act like they've got it all under control. But deep down, they miss the way you used to calm storms. They miss knowing that no matter how messy life got, you'd help them sort through it. And when that emotional anchor disappears, even temporarily, it can leave them feeling a little lost at sea. There's also something else that begins to rise up in your absence: responsibility. As children grow older, they slowly begin to realize that the roles are shifting, that the hands that once cared for them may now need care in return. It's not always a dramatic moment. Sometimes it's subtle. the first time they worry about your health, or when they catch themselves wondering if you've eaten well, or if the house is too quiet. And suddenly, without anyone saying it, they begin to feel responsible. Not out of burden, but out of love. They want to show up for you the way you showed up for them. But sometimes, they just don't know how. They're navigating careers, marriages, raising kids of their own, and in the chaos of daily life, they forget how quickly time slips by. Your absence, especially if you've been quiet for a while, becomes a reminder that nothing is guaranteed, that they can't keep putting it off, assuming there will always be a next weekend or next summer or next holiday. And that realization brings a quiet weight, a sense of, I need to do better. I need to make time. And it's not because you demanded anything. It's because you matter more to them than they know how to express. Now here's where things get a little more complicated. Sometimes your absence doesn't just trigger guilt or longing, it brings up unresolved emotions. Because let's be honest, not every family dynamic is simple. There are old wounds, misunderstandings, moments that didn't go the way either of you hoped. And when you're not around, those unspoken things can grow louder in their minds. They might start thinking about the last time you talked. Maybe it ended in frustration. Maybe they haven't known how to reach out since. Your absence gives them space to reflect, but it also stirs up hesitation. What if they're still hurt? What if it's too late? They begin to wrestle with the past, trying to find the right words, the right moment. And yet all it takes sometimes is one gentle gesture from you, a message, a note, even just sending an old photo, to break that wall down. Because as much as your absence brings up those old emotions, your presence, however small, can bring healing. It can give them permission to let go of the fear and step into a new kind of relationship with you. One rooted not in old roles, but in mutual understanding. There's also something incredibly tender that your absence can bring out in your children. Appreciation. You see, when you've always been there, it's easy to take it for granted. The check-in calls, the care packages, the stories, the steady love. But when that regular rhythm pauses, your kids start to remember all the small ways you've shown up for them across the years. They begin to recognize that not everyone had what they had. Not every friend of theirs grew up with a parent who stayed up late helping with projects, or cooked their favorite meals, or just listened, really listened, without judgment. In your absence, they begin to see the gift that your presence has always been. And for many of them, that realization is humbling. It softens them. It reminds them that love isn't always loud or flashy. It's in the quiet consistency, the patience, the way you always remembered birthdays, or how you never forgot what they liked in their coffee. Those things seemed small at the time, but now they shine like gold in their memory. This kind of appreciation often leads to a deeper desire to reconnect, to be more present, to say thank you, not just in passing, but from the heart. Your absence becomes the space where those feelings finally bloom. And the beautiful part? You don't have to do anything dramatic to receive them. You just have to stay open. Maybe that looks like answering the phone with a little more warmth. Maybe it means sending a message first, even if you feel like they should be the one reaching out. Or maybe it's simply saying, I was thinking about you today, and letting that be enough to start a new conversation. You have more power than you realize to shift the energy toward healing, connection, and joy. And if you've ever felt that maybe it's too late to repair, too late to rebuild, I want you to hear this clearly. It's not. As long as there's breath in your body and love in your heart, there's always a way back. Families aren't perfect. But the love between a parent and a child has a way of surviving storms, silence, and even years of distance. Sometimes it just needs a little spark, a little reminder, a small gesture that says, I still care. I'm still here. That's all it takes to reopen the door, and once it's open, you'll be amazed at what can walk through. And sometimes, the most surprising feeling your children have during your absence is admiration. Not the kind they show with grand speeches or gifts, but the quiet kind. The kind that grows as they begin to truly understand what it took to raise them, protect them, and love them all those years. It often doesn't hit them until they're older, until they've had to pay bills, raise their own kids, or navigate life's heartbreaks. Then, one day, they pause and think, "How did Mom do it all?" Or, "Dad worked so hard and never complained." And suddenly, the strength and sacrifice you offered without asking for recognition becomes clear. It stands tall in their memory. Even if they never said thank you the way they should have, they see it now. They feel it now. And in your absence, they finally begin to appreciate the depth of your love. The quiet kind that showed up every single day, even when you were tired, even when no one noticed. There's something beautiful about that kind of delayed recognition. It shows just how deeply your presence shaped who they are. And when you're not around, when your voice isn't part of their daily routine, that realization becomes sharper. The silence you leave behind doesn't just create distance. It creates a reflection, one where your values, your effort, your love echo. Now, of course, not all of what your children feel in your absence is sorrow or longing. Sometimes, especially if you've raised them with strong values and confidence, they feel a powerful sense of pride. Pride in the life you've built. Pride in your independence. Pride in watching you embrace your golden years with grace, with joy, with dignity. They talk about you with their friends. They tell stories of the strength you showed during hard times, or the humor you still bring into a room, or the lessons you taught them about kindness, forgiveness, or perseverance. They admire that you're still growing, still exploring, still showing up in your own way. Your absence in their daily lives doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means they've internalized your presence so deeply that you've become part of who they are. Your voice echoes in their decisions. Your spirit lives in their parenting. Your legacy is in motion every day, whether you're there to see it or not. And isn't that something? That even without being in the room, you're still shaping the atmosphere, still guiding, still loving. That's not something everyone gets to experience. That's a legacy. But I know even with all that said, there are still quiet moments where you wish things were closer, where you wish they'd call more, visit more, reach out more. That's natural. You've given so much of yourself, and all you want is to stay connected, to still feel needed, appreciated, involved. So let me say this. It's okay to reach out. It's okay to be the first to pick up the phone. It doesn't mean you're chasing them. It means you're showing them how to keep the bond alive. Because even though you may be the parent, relationships need tending from both sides. And sometimes your call is the exact nudge they needed. Your voice is the very thing they've been missing, but didn't know how to ask for. They may not always say it, but when you reach out, period. You're giving them permission to drop the busyness and reconnect with what really matters. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment. There's no perfect time to say, "I love you," or "I'm thinking of you," or even, "I miss our talks." Those simple words can open doors to deeper connection. They don't have to lead to a long, emotional conversation. Sometimes just hearing your voice, calm, familiar, steady, is enough to ground them in the middle of a chaotic day. And you know what else happens when you take that first step? You model something powerful. You show them that relationships don't have to be perfect to be meaningful, that it's okay to reach across the silence, that love can live through gaps in time, through differences, through misunderstandings. You give them permission to do the same one day, with their own children, with their friends, with themselves. Because whether you know it or not, you're still teaching, still guiding. Not from a lecture or a rule book, but from the quiet wisdom of how you live. your courage, your kindness, your resilience. These are things your children carry with them long after the holidays end and the phone calls get fewer. These are the pieces of you that never leave the room, even when you do. So, what do your kids feel during your absence? They feel guilt, yes, longing, maybe even regret, but they also feel love, deep, sometimes unspoken, but very real love. They feel pride. They feel the weight of time passing and a desire, whether they act on it or not, to reconnect. They feel your impact in their everyday lives, even when you don't realize it. And most of all, they feel your importance. Not because you're perfect, not because you've never made mistakes, but because you've been a constant, a presence, a heartbeat in their story. And if you're watching this and thinking, I wish I'd done things differently, or it's too late to repair what's been lost, I want you to hear this clearly. It is never too late for love, never too late for healing, never too late to be a part of your children's lives in the way that feels right for you now. Maybe that means calling them just to say you're proud of who they've become. Maybe it means writing a letter to say what's been sitting in your heart. Or maybe it just means showing up again and again in small, quiet ways, until they realize you've been there all along, just waiting. If you felt seen, heard, or touched by anything we've shared today, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share a memory, a lesson, or even a moment of silence that turned into connection. Your stories matter. And chances are, they'll inspire someone else who's been feeling the same way. If this video brought value to your life, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to our channel, Strong Elderly Life. We create this space to uplift, encourage, and walk beside you in every season of life. You're not alone here. You're part of something meaningful. So keep showing up. Keep reaching out. And most of all, keep believing that your love, your presence, still matters deeply. Here's to living your best life at any age. And here's to love that never leaves, even when we do.